Hello and welcome to the Mindful Man Project. This is where we discuss all the issues and pieces of the puzzle that is mental health. We look at the things in life that get people down or create anxiety in their life and hopefully give some guidance on how to become a modern mindful man or woman. I am your host, Tyson Venables. On today's episode, we have Tom Ahern. Tom's a counsellor from Melbourne. He's a mate of mine. We've been mates for a couple of years now. Tom's definitely been on his own journey dealing with anxiety, PTSD. He's turned that around and he's now helping people get the help that they need through his own counselling business. And we just really have a sit down and have a good old chat, bit of fun along the way. There is some expletives, so if you do need to tune out, you can tune out now. Otherwise, strap yourself in and let's go. He's one of my mates from, I've met him a little while ago now.
Yeah.
Probably through his girlfriend, but also one of our more mutual friends, Khan Porter. And that was that first day that we first met each other up in Sydney when you came up to interview him and you started serenading him. That was one of the highlights of one of the things I first remember of you. So that was pretty fun.
Yeah, God, that was good. That's right. We were talking about, I think I was serenading single ladies to him.
Yes.
That was very good.
It was the Khan Porter single ladies rendition.
Yeah.
If you're ever looking for that, it's like on Adventure Fit Travel.
Yeah. It's called Brolosophy now.
Brolosophy.
It's my mate's podcast, Bill, but it's in the archives there. It's a time I'll never forget, my friend. I was basically coming onto him.
Well, he's an attractive human.
He's a good-looking man.
If he's listening to this, then hopefully he gets a bit of a G up from it.
Yes, very true.
What have you been up to,
Mate?
Since then?
Yeah, since then, been... I always loved podcasting when Bill and I were doing it together. Excuse me. And I think at that time I was getting more and more interested in the mind, trying to come to terms with kind of my own mind, understand myself a bit more, and just kind of studying psychology, and doing all that sort of thing led to the My Mate podcast, which is my own show. And then that just kind of really took off into just, again, like enveloping this idea that, the study of the mind and talking about the mind, anything to do with the mind is really, at least at this stage of my life, what my ego's attached itself to. And it gives me a lot of purpose, gives me a lot of meaning, allows me to get out of bed every day. And just recently I started my own counselling practice.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, which is really, really exciting. And just kind of, I think from the short time I've been doing it, speaking to people about their lives, I've just noticed that so many mental health issues can be avoided with practical changes in our lives, just little things that we can do to just serve ourselves a little more. I'm not talking about tools necessarily, but even just little things like, every day I go to work and I just feel this massive sack on my head.
Yeah.
Taking a bit of time to recognize why that would be the case, as opposed to shaming the feeling, oh fuck, I've got depression or whatever it is. Well, hang on a second, that's a signal, it's trying to tell you something. Just give it 15 minutes. And very quickly, for example, you're probably going to realize, well, it's probably because your boss verbally abuses you every day. And then from that, you can take the stoic approach and you can be like, okay, I've got two things I can do here. I can tell him to stop and actually try to work towards some sort of conflict resolve, or I can leave. And just a practical change like that, helps us out so much when you're dealing with complex trauma and addiction and, developmental trauma. They can be really difficult to kind of change those behavioural patterns that have,
it's changing those patterns and just checking in with that story and seeing whether, okay, all right, I see this story happening. How can I change you to rectify that pattern? And
absolutely. And that's becoming a bigger interest of mine is looking into complex trauma, PTSD, and all that sort of stuff. But like what I said at the beginning of that whole fucking tangent was basically just how we can find more meaning and stuff. And that's studying the mind.
Is it your clinic or?
It's actually a meditation studio that my other half is opening up. So she's opening up the breathwork shed. So the way we kind of wanted to market it was, somatic experiencing is one of the best ways to release trauma, because you actually, and there's a number of physiological things that are going on inside the brain, but fundamentally you're releasing these implicit memories, or at least bringing them into conscious awareness. And when that occurs, the ego starts to re-narrativize what that was. And what I would like to do in those situations is when people, through this sort of breathwork meditation, are made aware of, like you said, behavioural patterns or things that happened to them when they were very young, or things that they've just started to realise have actually led their life for them, or influenced them negatively, or whatever it is, I could come in with my counselling experience and help them kind of understand that a little bit more. Yeah, so that's what's really exciting.
That's really cool. So you guys have literally now joined forces, like like Siobhan.
Yeah.
Siobhan, his partner, is pretty amazing, and so what you guys are doing there is like hitting it two different ways and essentially being able to help the community in a well-rounded, holistic kind of approach, I guess.
Yeah.
It's pretty good to see, like, both of your evolutions from, like, being in the CrossFit gym and, like, pretty much, like being that person with the sack over the head and just dragging your ass in there sometimes just because, like, you had to do it. But now you guys are, like, frothing on the things that you're doing. It's pretty good to see. So the Mind Mate, like, is that still going, or is, like, the podcast and stuff like that, or is it...
Definitely.
Yeah? But you're kind of taking it more down the counselling route and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I love that podcast, that podcast, you were on the show, mate. It was fucking brilliant, listening to your story that I had no idea about. And, we live in a world where everything's so busy now, everyone has stuff on, but the best thing about podcasting, it allows two people to make time for each other and bring that together. And sometimes it even is with mates, like you and I, like, we're really good friends. But we both lead busy lives, and that's something that we put on ourselves, for good reasons, because we're interested in a lot of things. But making time like this is a great way for us to connect and chat and do that sort of thing. So the podcast hits three fronts, really. It's psychology, spirituality, and philosophy. But it's essentially about ways to get to know your mind, and it's gender inclusive. It's all demographics. It's I try to get a vast variety of people on there. People that have psychedelic assisted therapy. I do some blogs of my own in there. All different sorts of psychologists and things like that. I just thought it would be really cool to bridge the gap between psychologists and potential patients and clients, because there's a lot of untapped knowledge that I think that we can just kind of learn together. And it was a really good way for me to kind of learn myself, so that I could be the best counsellor I could be to my own clients.
It's kind of like a bit of a cathartic experience in itself. You're kind of learning as you go, but you're also learning about yourself, and you can kind of start to see these tendencies or even these interests that you're interested in. It's like you can see some podcasters, it's almost like a therapy session for themselves. Massive. But, like, it's also, if you can allow that space for the person who's on to actually allow their story to come forward, it's great. And that's where I want to go to with next, is like a bit of like your background, like what you've been through, what's led you to this point now. Like, you've written a book and stuff like that, but what's got you to this point? What's formed you, and what have you dealt with?
I mean, I did not grow up wanting to be interested in the mind, really. I wanted to be an AFL player, and I wanted to run on the MCG, as I think a lot of kids did, but I guess what kind of got me into it, unfortunately at the time, was just a massive panic attack, a big trigger, when I was 21. And I've since kind of forensically, scientifically gone back into my childhood to figure out why that did trigger me so much. And there was a specific time in my childhood, where, basically when there are three different responses to fear, and there's fight, flight, or freeze, and we all know those three. There's actually a fourth one, really, appease, which is more of a conscious thing. It's like you can befriend someone. Kind of like, hey man, cool, here's my wallet, whatever. Which is kind of like a flight, really. But fight, flight, and freeze. And we know the first two. We're not really too sure about the third one, which is freeze. And what actually happens is when we're when danger is present, or when our evolutionary circuitry thinks that danger is present, and we also were aware that we can't get away from it. So we can't fight because the person's a lot bigger than us. We can't run because we're trapped. We freeze. And all of that stuff in the body that's preparing us for these incredibly, scary times is internalized. All that cortisol, that adrenaline is trapped. And, if it's not let out, like animals in the wild will shake vigorously after a fearful moment to make sure that all that tension is released. If it's not released, it can trap itself. And that's what happened to me when I was very young. It's a very innocuous experience. It's a very innocent experience. It's actually something that I struggled to talk about for a long time because I shamed myself for years so much about it. But essentially, when I was 10, me and a friend of mine, I don't actually see him anymore, not for any reason, but we were just playing with each other. It was a very innocent childhood thing. We're touching each other's private parts and touching each other's bums and shit like that, And anyway, we were doing that upstairs. We were playing like Age of Empires and doing that thing as well. And his parents were walking up the stairs. And because we're upstairs, we were trapped. So that talks about that freeze response. And I got very scared very quickly. Not for any reason that I thought what we were doing was bad, just because I just had this intense sensation that of judgment, his parents would judge us. And, I'm reflecting on this experience as an adult, but back then, none of this would have made sense. I was just a kid doing something kiddie. And anyway, that happened, and, more or less they kind of saw what we were doing and nothing really came about. They probably didn't even care. It's a very classic childhood thing. But I shamed myself for it for so many years. And, like I was telling you about, when you don't shake all that tension out vigorously, it internalizes. And anyway, something, again, relatively innocuous when I was 21, triggered it massively again. And that led me into this incredibly challenging path of intense obsessive compulsive disorder, which is essentially a response, and there's not a whole lot of research about it, but there's essentially a response from self-shame, and it's a trigger from some sort of subjective traumatic experience when you're younger, and it's essentially this idea that you're not deserved of happiness and all this sort of thing. It's all very unconscious, but that led me down this 4, 5, 6 year journey of trying to understand myself more and understand the mind more. And I was also very obsessive compulsive with other things, like I'd had to pick up lots of rubbish to prove to God that I was a good person, otherwise I'd go to hell for eternity and all this sort of stuff. But OCD was fundamentally my big issue. And then understanding more about that, understanding the way other people's minds work, how we all have just this mammalian 3 billion year, certainly 2 million year circuitry in us that's allowed us to survive to now. Doing this podcast has just kind of been what has led me to be obsessed with conversations like this.
Yeah, it's a great journey.
Yeah,
but it's funny when you start to go on that path of self-realization and unpicking the little bits and pieces and those little journeys that you thought that they may not have been, or your parents or someone might have thought that was not an issue, and then it just continues and it continues to snowball until sometimes you just go, oh fuck, I've had enough of this, I need to work out what's going on. And I've been through that myself with a few different things, and it's just you go, holy fuck, where is that trigger coming from? Where is that trigger coming from? And then I found with meditation and sitting in it and sitting with it and seeing what and where it's coming up, and you can generally just start to really work through it, and you just dive a little bit deeper and go, okay, where was that? Why was that coming up? Where? And then I've had this things where it's come up where even with my parents splitting up, I always I'd stop accepting help from people. And it came back from when my parents split up, and one would give me money and the other one would kick up a stink, or the other one would give me money or do something for me, and the other one was like a bitch or an asshole for doing it. Yeah. So I was like, well, fuck this. I'm not going to accept help from anyone, because
Yeah.
I'll just do it all myself, because then that way then I'm not going to get into trouble or feel bad for taking, like, and feel guilt. And it's funny, like, when you start to dive back and you go, okay, like, that's not me, that was their stuff or whatever. It's like, and you start to have this like really strong sense of release, or in that area that you're feeling it, in the guts, in the chest. And when you start to feel that, it's just like,
oh man,
it's a
heaven.
Lightness. Yeah, it's such a lightness when it leaves you. And it's really like, when I realized that situation, then it was like, I started bawling.
Yeah, of course.
I was like, holy shit, this is just it's a new release. Like, now I can ask for help, and it's just like, cool.
Yeah.
Like, it's actually empowering in the end. And it's like, once you're probably the same, you probably felt a little bit more empowered, that you're able to go, cool, now I know what the fuck's going on.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're exactly right, man. And I think what is, since we are talking about, because trauma is so subjective, it can be literally someone, like Siobhan said this, who's my partner, she studied trauma, and she said, it can become someone calling you ugly when you were 6. But what it does, the reason why you know it's trauma is because when something like that happens, parents splitting, parents walking up the stairs, someone calling you ugly, is that experience will happen. And then in order to kind of some sort of, to receive positive affirmation or validation from the outside world, you will start to build up this certain aspects of you that will receive that. And then you will suppress and shame and shunt away the other stuff that is also you, that at the time of that traumatic event wasn't accepted. So your psyche kind of fragments, and you start walking, even if it's 1 degree to the left, just this slightly less authentic path. And I feel like much of the psychotherapeutic process is about reintegrating those moments back into conscious awareness, and just be like, hey, look, yes, there are societal norms. Obviously you're not going to just go and fucking yell out or do whatever you want right in a church or something. There are things and guidelines we have to stick to. But it's also about recognizing this was you too. Right before this moment, that was you as well. And it's, just because you acted like this and someone said that wasn't good, or someone said you ought to do this or you shouldn't do this, it doesn't mean that that's not who you are. That's their shit. Exactly like what you said.
Exactly. And it's... And that's what you said. Each trauma has its level, and people are going to deal with trauma in different ways.
Yeah.
And it's just generally, and it's been the hardest thing is facing it. Is that it's the fear. It's massive. The fear to face it and be able to sit in it and go, like, nobody likes sitting in uncomfortable shit.
No.
Like, even as a baby, when you pooed your pants, you scream your ass.
Even as a 26-year-old, mate.
Yeah.
I'm doing it now. Sorry about the cash. We'll get to that.
Every new job I go to is like, I'm sorry about it.
Yeah, I keep shitting my pants. I'm still unemployed. We had to go there.
Tangent. Oh, no, yeah, but that's the thing is, when you start to really dive deeper into that psyche and the emotional trauma, and it's a big journey. It doesn't happen overnight.
No,
and it's definitely and it's an unpacking of everything. And you're literally, I like to think of it as like, how the old school computers, when it was like the IBM computers and stuff, and you had to do a defrag.
Yeah.
When the computer slowed down so much that it just was shitting itself.
Yeah.
You couldn't open up that Pornhub
that
you were looking at.
Unfortunately.
It was like, Mom's going to catch me.
Yeah.
But it was like, all right, I've got to defrag. And it's the same sort of thing as like that trauma is like, you got so much built up on top of this like unstable thing that it's going to take a little bit of time to reshuffle everything, reshuffle that structure, and put it back in. And I think it's such a, like, as I've started to do some more research and stuff into like epigenetics and stuff like that, and like when we continue to hold on to trauma or different things, that's when the cells in that area or wherever in the body, you can start to see breakdown or cancerous issues and stuff like that start to come. And it's like, it's so important to actually then really start to work on those areas. Otherwise, who knows what'll happen for you.
Definitely. And, you know, one of the first things you have to do with that sort of work is kind of allow yourself to be vulnerable and allow yourself to be like, I do need some help here, because, you know, removing that side of things, like, okay, look, I have a problem here that needs to get addressed. I think that's one of the hardest things in the world to do, you know, and it's different for everyone. It takes a long time. It takes decades for people before they can be like, cool, I may not have all the answers, you know. But yeah, you're exactly right, mate. It's definitely a long process, and I hope, you know, it would be almost embarrassing, you know, that in 5 years' time now, I can look back on my life now and be like, holy fuck, I was holding on to a lot of shit then.
Yeah.
You know, I would hope that that's the case.
You touched on vulnerability. It's a bit of a keyword at the moment in the health and wellness industry, and just people who are going on that journey of self unpacking and like growth. What do you actually consider to be vulnerable, especially as men? Like we generally don't open up or don't have the words to show our vulnerability. What would you consider to be vulnerable?
Fuck, it's a really good question, man. I think vulnerability is, you know, somewhat congruent with humility. It's just kind of like, maybe I need some help. And it doesn't have to be about mental health or whatever it is. Just, it's about telling the truth, you know? And if you're in a situation in life where you're not fucking ecstatic 24/7, like you are literally simultaneously eating 10 MDMA pills and coming all the time, if that's not you, then you should probably reach out to others.
Yeah.
Because, and that's no one, by the way, in case you couldn't guess the sarcasm. No one is eating that much MDMA and orgasming that much. If they are, I want to meet them. How are you doing
That's
this?
another podcast.
Exactly. Yeah. No, but the idea behind vulnerability is being honest with yourself and then finding the courage to be honest with someone else. And we have evolved socially. You know, yes, life is an individual game, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't involve other people. And it has to involve other people, not only for the reasons of survival, like it has for millions of years, but also at the same time, you may know something I don't. And if that is the case, and if that bit of information is going to help me, I mean, I'm going to be selfish and ask you. And then I may know something you don't, you know? And no one has it figured out. But there are other people, and many other people in this world, that have the areas that you don't have figured out, or at least are moving towards that journey. And so vulnerability is a bizarre word, because people think it's, you know, it's weakness, you know? And I think more and more people are coming to terms with the actual significance of the word vulnerability. But I think for me, it comes down to humility and truth with yourself and with others.
And I think, like, growing up in Australia and being an Australian, we grew up for years thinking the little Aussie battler doesn't ask for help. He just gets it done, and however they can get it done is how they get it done. Yeah. But it's slowly starting to change. You go, okay, like, I need help in this. I need help in that. Like, otherwise you just end up going, what the fuck is going on? And shutting down. And that's the thing is knowing when to ask help. And even if it doesn't work for you, and that it doesn't resonate with, if you've asked for that help, and you go, oh, that doesn't actually really resonate with what I'm doing, or go and seek out more. Like, that's what I've been loving lately, is just like seeking out the help of others, because it's just like, I don't have enough time in the day to do all the shit that I do. And whether it's unpacking the thoughts in my brain, someone coming to someone who actually knows how to unpack my thoughts, or someone who knows how to set up a website or whatever, and it's like, I don't know how to do that shit. You can do it. And then that way, then it just allows you to level up, and it frees the space in your head, in your body, or in your, like, wherever it is, to be able to then just focus on that shit that you're really jamming on doing, and then possibly having those 10 MDMAs.
Simultaneous experience. But look, like, this is a very, very clear analogy that I think is, like, really pertinent here. All right, let's say you are day one tradie on the job. You've never, ever even picked up a fucking hammer before. And you need to build a house, right? Where are you going to start?
Yeah.
You will have no idea. You don't even know what the word nail means.
Yeah.
Like I bet someone's telling you you have to build a house, or you yourself want to build a house.
Yeah.
Can you do anything else but ask for help, right? If you're depressed and anxious and you're carrying a lot of weight through traumatic experience, you're an addict, right? And you want to get happier, or you just want to find yourself a bit more, or you want to just not be in that shit situation again, right? If you're that far entrenched in pain, you're like that tradie who doesn't know what the word nail means. You have no idea how to build a house. You have no idea how to find happiness and meaning, and you have no idea what meaning is even relevant to happiness or whatever it is. You don't even know what you're aiming for. It's the same thing. You've got to ask for help.
Yeah.
And if you think you have it all figured out, you are going to stay stuck in that situation. And it sucks because a lot of people do. And, we don't get a whole lot of time here. And there's going to be one day when you're going to fall asleep and never wake up for eternity. And the idea of who you are is completely gone and eradicated. No one will know who you are. Gone. So the only thing you have is your own sense of worth. And you should cherish that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know my story, and people who've listened to my podcast, they would know. And it's the same thing, yeah. You're given a finite amount of time, and sometimes people cut that short, and it's just like being able to take that bull by the horns and take that apprentice step into asking the builder how to get out of that hole. Then that's where you start to really find that the way forward. And I guess that's what you're doing with your work and
trying to,
yeah.
Failing, asking for help many times.
So you're and like you're taking on men, women, all ages, all different types of people, or specialising in something in areas. And
I think I probably will. I'm working with a psychologist who he was on my podcast recently. He's Order of Australia medal, and he spent 25 years studying and working with complex trauma, people with PTSD, and understanding a lot more about dreams, the integration of trauma into conscious awareness, like looking into that field. But working with people from all different kind of areas in life, purely because I want to learn more about people. I want to learn more about the mind. And I think if I just stayed in one avenue, I could become hopefully very good in that avenue, but it wouldn't give me a broad sense of the human psyche in its totality. And I think the areas that I love helping people the most in, at least at the moment, is, like I said, that trauma stuff fascinates me so much. But anxiety responses, and I guess the existential component as well, like how you can start to gear towards finding purpose as opposed to chasing the lovely transient idea of happiness, which is very, very funny to me. That somehow it's important for us to just be happy all the time is so bizarre, because it's just like when you're really fucking thirsty, happiness is a glass of water. You know, it changes all the time. But what does get human beings out of bed every morning, rain, hail, or shine, is the idea that there is a reason for them to do so. And then finding that, as subjective it is for people, it's Morpheus said it to Neo in The Matrix. He was like, there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. So in order to find purpose and have life unfold as you embrace it, you actually have to take the first step. Because you're not going to have all the answers at our age, mate. Hopefully, again, like I said, we'll look back 60, 70 years from now and be like, Jesus, what the hell? I can see what we were doing. But those areas I'm just fascinated with, and I love talking to people about it.
So that brings me to my next question. 3 tips that you would love to offer to the listener that they could take away that you've learned, or you'd like to share with them, that they could potentially nail or start integrating into their life tomorrow to start to build into that next better or their best self.
Best self is to start. First one would be to start telling the truth, as hard as that is. And it's not like people always want to fix all their problems in one day. They'll go out and get real cooked, and then the next morning they're like, I'm never drinking again. I was like, awesome. Let's see.
We've all been there.
We've all been there. Yeah. I do it all the time. I said I'd never make that joke again, but I did it. God. But like, that's great. But how about next weekend you just drink one less beer?
Yeah.
And then you'll just be proportionally happier and more proud of yourself. Because I think a lot of life is about developing really good self-discipline. But tip number one would to be honest, or at least more honest than you have been. Because we all lie, you know.
Yeah.
But as long as you don't lie about the big things in your life, the things that are really holding you back, that can be a really great first step. Number two, off the top of my head, I think this will probably resonate with men more specifically, but definitely with women, is that we have in us these primordial instinctual forces that just want to bubble up all over the time. Like, we all are just ravenous, ultra sexually inclined chimps that want to fucking eat and fight each other. You know, like I said at the beginning of that, there's probably more tended towards men there. But if you cannot try to shame yourself for that, but just express those instinctual emotions in productive ways. Like, for me, I found that until recently, I didn't realize that anger, I had a really big issue with anger. And that would be suppressed and then fueled into resentment. And since starting jiu-jitsu, I just feel a lot less angry, almost to the point I don't have anger in me anymore.
Yeah, cool.
You know, I feel really great. So having like that outlet of like powerful, whatever you need, you know, anger isn't necessarily prevalent within a lot of everyone, but whatever you need, don't be afraid to do that. As long as it's productive. I don't want you to go out fucking stabbing people, you know, but you need to do that. It's so healthy for you to do that, you know. So telling the truth or becoming more truthful, letting out your emotions in productive ways. And then the final thing I would say would be to have a think about a hobby that you really enjoy. Like, you know, passion's a word like vulnerability, you know, it's kind of like he's talking about kale juice, you know, shut up, you know. Yeah. But like something on the side where you have a lot of autonomy in, where you're not totally guided by what the boss is telling you to do or what you should do, or the Buddhists call it like, you know, that Dharma work. But having something where it's totally up to you, and it's totally up to you how good you get. Like, could be knitting for someone, or like my boss, who I get along with, he's just gotten into beehives, you know. But who knows where that could end up? Yeah. So, and how good would it be to say that this is your thing? You know, for me, it's writing. Yeah, and that's the thing is like, especially when you start to really jam on something and you're really enjoying it, and then it kind of comes into your work and you're now getting paid for it. Yeah. That's where you start to get those blurred lines with like, is it now a hobby or is it work? And then I say, okay, yeah, I'm still getting paid for it. It's something I'm getting paid for. I am accountable to somebody. It's still a hobby, it's still loving it, but find something you're not actually getting paid for. Yeah. And you just froth it, whether it's surfing, like beehives, or candle making. Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, that's your thing for now. Like, yeah, your bees, your honeys, your honey might end up being you're selling, but you're just frothing it. Yeah. And yeah, I agree. I love the hobby situation, because it's you doing you with what you purely want to actually be able to do. Definitely. Outside of the man or whatever is telling you what to do. And yeah, it's really like, for me, it's surfing or rock climbing. Yeah. I'm the happiest when I'm doing those two things. It's just like, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you touched on writing. Yeah. You're a bit of a writer. Enjoy it. Yes, I love it. I did it when I was a kid. I think hobbies are very much distinct with like what you did as a kid. When you were completely unconscious, you weren't carrying around any of that, I ought to do this, I should have done this, that fear. You know, a lot of what we were doing as a kid, like, you know, a lot of us were doing things like the fact that you're getting out there on the surfing board or climbing or all that sort of stuff. Like, how like congruent is that to childhood? We're climbing on trees and playing like there's no such thing as time. Yeah. It is playing. And and I feel like I listened to a podcast the other day, I think it was Paul Chek, and they were talking about how adults struggle to really play with children and not
cast their dispersion or their idea on how the game should go. Children are at their most raw and just literally will pick up a stick, and that becomes a person.
Yeah.
Whereas an adult will pick up the stick and go, no, that's a stick. That's a stick, Timmy.
Exactly.
It's like, no, but he's seeing it as a person. We'll allow him to see it as a person. And it's just like being able to go back as an adult and start to like just be in your environment and just allow that to happen and be at play is one of the most fulfilling and just light-hearted experiences I think you can do as an adult, especially.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Like there are specifically like Mahayana Buddhism, what they'll do is they'll take their students and they'll give them these like really bizarre riddles, and they'll try to to test to see whether or not they're enlightened. And obviously, like full enlightenment, like reaching that stage of nirvana, which means blowout, is essentially the ego is just gone. You just pretty much died. You're
literally just up and just floating away.
You're just gone. Yeah. But like one of the things, I was reading a book and they were talking about how one of the things a Zen master did was he gave like a cooling fan to 3 of his students. And he was like, "What's this?" And one of the students went like this. And for everyone listening, it was like waving the fan. He took it back. He was like, okay, cool. So he's identified purely with the label that someone told him it was. Anyway, gives it to the next one, and he just kind of plays with it again. So he's like opening it and closing it. So it's not essentially, he's not using it for its socially constructed purpose, but he's still using the fan. He's like, no, take it back. He gives it to the last person. The last one takes a chocolate cake and gives it back to him. And he's like, cool, that guy gets it. It's basically the idea that like the labels that we put on things to define things, people get so ingrained with, exactly like you said, a stick is a stick. It could not be a person. But have a think about who put the labels on those things.
Yeah.
The ego, the human being, And one of the things that the bodhisattvas do, and the people that, the Buddhas that have reached enlightenment but stay behind to help everyone that's struggling and suffering, is that they try to teach people that labels are socially constructed, and really the only meaning that we attach to anything is the meaning that we actually can and we want to. Life is just this big game and this massive playing field, but we define ourselves and we don't have to do that. That's getting very off tangent.
We could literally go down a rabbit hole. Maybe we'll pick that up another day.
Yeah.
We could literally go.
That was hectic.
2 hours later, we're like...
Yeah. So dude, fuck.
Hobbies.
Yeah, we're back on the hobbies. Oh god, I know.
We actually started talking about your writing. And
yes. Shit. I know. Well, that's actually part of the second book. The second book is about kind of that inward journey and starting to find, the psychologist I love the most is Carl Jung. I love his work. He's just changed the way I see the world. My dreams have changed ever since I started reading his work on about the unconscious. And, that's where I got that idea from. He said, what did you do as a kid that made the time fly like seconds? Therein lies the answer to your life's meaning. Yeah. And for me, it was writing. I wrote when I was 10 years old, I wrote a book about a kid who struggled with depression. And I knew I was 10 because it was dated 2003. And so I think I've always been interested in philosophy.
And 10-year-old writing about depression, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I know. I think I was struggling with it then. I said the first memory I have is a panic attack because I looked at myself and I was really worried about how I got into this thing, that people call the human body. But they were my first memories, and I always use writing as a way to kind of understand myself more. And then, like we were talking about at the beginning of this, trauma comes in, ought to do's, ought not to do's, and I stopped writing and I started chasing football for the expediency of wanting all the girls and all the money and stuff. But then that big trigger, because sometimes the unconscious just goes, you know what? Fuck you, man.
I'm still here, man.
Exactly.
Deal with it.
You've deviated.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you know about it. So then it was kind of like trying to find that path again. A unit of measurement to go off that is the people in my life I really bond with a lot more. I feel a lot happier being myself. I love talking like this with good people like yourself. So I'm just going to keep trying to chase that feeling of oneness in myself. But yeah, I do love writing. It's It's awesome. I think everyone should write. Everyone should have a podcast.
Absolutely.
Everyone should write.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I always used to say that I wasn't much of a writer, and I started writing poetry.
Yeah.
And poetry just flows.
Yeah.
Like, I just think and if you can put a nice, if I can put a nice poem together, it just like it talks to me, and whoever reads it takes something away from it. And yeah, like I've never been much of a writer like yourself writing books, but like
one day, mate. One day.
No, but like that's the thing is like compiling these poems. I have over 100 and something poems now, and it's like it's almost book worthy.
Yeah.
And I never thought I would actually be able to do that. It's just writing poems and just scribbling words down and making them work. And it's like Emma, my girlfriend, she refers to me as like really quite analytical and placing the Jenga blocks where they need to go. And I feel poetry's kind of that way as well, because you're placing the words where they need to go to make it flow.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, I feel like when I'm writing it, that's it. It's like that the mind is working and putting in, that works, that sounds great, that keeps rolling, and there's really quite something special about it, being able to write something. And I agree, some people should be out, like, who gives a shit if it sounds like crap to begin with? Like, nobody else has to read it. Yeah,
Humpty Dumpty sat on the fork. Doesn't sound right.
That would be a bit painful.
That'd be shit. Yeah. Poor old Humpty Dumpty's crackers. Humpty's crackers.
So we'll circle it back into the final three questions. Three things that you'd tell your younger self.
Fuck, that's such a good question, isn't it? Three things that I'd tell my younger self. You know, I think what do you tell your younger self? Because like I'm just trying to put myself in the mindset of who I was, 5-10 years ago, and telling myself 5-10 years ago that footy may not be for you would just be like, who the fuck are you? Like, footy is everything to me.
Yeah, footy.
Everything.
For most adolescent males,
it's everything.
That's literally what it is.
Yeah. I just can't imagine not think. So I guess on that front, then, what I would say, because I don't think you should ever steal a lesson from anyone. I think something that hopefully in a couple of years' time, when Siobhan and I start thinking about having little ones, is that I would never want to take a lesson from them, because I would be robbing them of the experience of life, So I think what I would do to my younger self would just be like, you're loving footy at the moment, you're loving doing what you're doing, whatever it is. Just make sure that whatever you do in life, you do it to its fullest capacity. So there's no stone unturned, So that would be one, I guess, really doing things to the best of your ability. Number two, I think, would be to just try to get a little bit more reflective. So I guess I could tell my younger self to just have a think about who you're hanging around with, like why, almost like developing a conversation, like learning to develop a conversation, or like a self-audit almost. And I guess number three would be to really it's a brilliant question, man. It would be to really cherish the times where you literally can't stop laughing.
Yeah.
And that's it. I reckon that would be really good, because they're so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we hardly ever get those times. When we do, fuck, they're brilliant.
Yeah, and especially they're the times that you can sit back and you go, like, whoever was there.
Yeah.
And especially if you do like a cool guided meditation or whatever, and that person drops you into that time where, like, experience that time where it was the most fun in your life.
Yeah.
And it brings up, bubbles up that fucking awesome energy that you want to be at. And as a kid, you have so many of those experiences.
Yeah.
And to be able to, I think just to be able to relish those, that's a pretty good answer. I love that one.
That's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
You and I have a lot of those, mate.
Yeah.
Let's have a few more.
That's it.
We'll make sure we do.
Yeah. So, we'll definitely catch up and let's do another podcast.
Mate, for sure.
Where can the guys catch you? What are you doing? Where are you at? What socials are you on socials anymore? You got dropped off them for a bit.
I did. Yeah, 6 months I kind of went off them. I just needed to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like MindMate Counselling is something that I'm most excited about at the moment. It's on Instagram, it's MindMate Counselling. I think it's on Facebook as well, but that's where you'll kind of find all my podcast snippets and, highlights from my YouTube channel. It's kind of like top of funnel stuff. Get people aware of this sort of counselling that I do and the kind of the way that I have a look at the mind and all that sort of stuff. So I would just say that. I don't have to go crazy on it. You can find me when I was 10 years old. But that's what I'm most
Everything
excited.
else is there. That's your one central hub.
Yeah, MindMate Counselling. It's really exciting for me. So if you are keen for a chat, if any of this has resonated with you, then don't feel afraid to reach out. And if I'm not the right person for you, then hopefully I know someone that does, or that is the right person. So yeah.
Cool, man. Thank you for coming along,
mate. I loved
it.
Chat
and some good giggles.
Our pants have been off the whole show.
Yeah.
Which has been liberating.
Yeah, liberating. Yeah, it's like
liberating.
Liberating.
As well. It's been liberating.
It's taking me back to that 10-year-old boy.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit too liberating. G'day, mate.
Get your hand off it, Daryl.
Sorry, it's not a stick.
And eggplant. Thanks, mate.
No worries, mate. Cheers.
Well, we have some exciting news. Myself and Emma are launching a health and fitness retreat in Jan Juk in November. 3 nights of accommodation, yoga, fitness, surfing, and some meditation thrown in. If you want to get involved, check out the link in the website. Spaces are limited, so make sure you get in first as we are filling up fast. Well, that brings us to the end of today's show. If you like what you heard and want to get all the info, check out the show notes. While you're there, rate and review the show. And one last thing, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the upcoming episodes. Until next time, my friends, continue to look out for each other and continue to lift each other up.